What if I told you the real terror of medieval life wasn't the battlefield, it was the bathroom? No swords, no knights, just butts, bacteria, and a stench that could kill a horse. So grab your courage and maybe a clothespin for your nose. Hit subscribe before we dive straight into the muck. Forget private bathrooms. In the Middle Ages, privacy meant finding a dark corner of a field. Castles had tiny guard robes, little stone rooms that jutted out over the moat. One hole in the floor and down it went. Into water, mud, or a pit that no one ever wanted to empty. And when the wind turned just right, the smell came roaring back up like a ghost of last night's feast. Cities tried to be clever. They built septic pits, but somebody had to clean them. Enter the gong farmers, men who climbed down into oceans of waste with nothing but a shovel and luck. Many never came back up. Some suffocated on fumes, others carried infections that rotted them alive. Their pay, enough for bread and ale. Their dignity, left at the bottom of the pit. Meanwhile, peasants squatted where they could, behind barns, along hedges, even in the pigsty. In villages, waste piled up in communal ditches, a playground for rats and flies, and disease spread faster than gossip at a tavern. Children were the first to fall. Scratched skin, open sores, no clean water. Filth was more deadly than any knight's sword. And then came the question no one dared whisper. What did they wipe with? Peasants used whatever was near. Straw if you were lucky, stinging nettles if you weren't. Moss was popular, soft, green, absorbent, but sometimes nothing at all. A quick shake, a prayer, and you carried on. Others used their bare left hand, washing it in cold streams afterward, if there was a stream. Even today, in some cultures, the left hand still carries that ancient shadow of uncleanliness. By the sea, things got sharper. Fishermen scraped with she shells, jagged, cruel, and one slip away from disaster. In drier lands, sticks or smooth stones did the job. Broken pottery shards? Those required surgeon's precision, or else. The wealthy had options. Monks in monasteries wiped with linen cloths. Nobles too, though servants had to scrub them clean for reuse. Perfumed herbs stuffed into tunics helped mask the lingering odor. But no amount of rose water could hide the truth. A king's backside stank just as badly as his poorest subjects. The irony? The Romans, centuries earlier, had done better. Their invention, the tertiarium, a sponge tied to a stick, rinsed in vinegar or salty water. Practical, cleanish. But after Rome collapsed, Europe abandoned the sponge and clung to the stick. Progress flushed away. Sometimes peasants found themselves grateful for winter. Why? Snow. A handful of ice pressed where the sun doesn't shine. Painful, shocking, unforgettable. And likely followed by cracked skin and infection. Still, it was cleaner than straw. And yet this filth carried dangers beyond rashes. Waste pits filled with methane. A single candle could turn the latrine into a bomb. And yes, records confirm it. People actually died from exploding bathrooms. Imagine your final words, not carved in stone, but echoing through history as the poor soul who lit a torch near the wrong pit. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, things looked very different. In cities like Baghdad and Cairo, hygiene wasn't optional, it was law. Water was the standard, ablution part of faith, public baths, sewage systems, fountains of cleanliness while Europe wallowed in dung. One half of the world washed, the other half itched. So what does this all tell us? That medieval life was dirty, dangerous, and far deadlier than anyone likes to imagine. Not from swords or sieges, but from what lurked in every ditch, moat, and chamber pot. Forget dragons and knights. The real monster of the Middle Ages was the latrine. Let's start with the glamorous job nobody wanted, the gong farmer. These men climbed into cesspits knee-deep in filth to shovel out centuries of human waste. No mask, no gloves, just leather scraps and a prayer. One wrong move and the fumes alone could suffocate you.
Imagine dying because the outhouse burped at the wrong moment. And when the pit didn't choke you, it exploded. Methane gas plus open flame equals fiery death. Yes, people literally got blown off the toilet. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was fatal. Meanwhile, the poor did what they could. Straw bundles, handfuls of moss, snow in winter. Efficient? Barely. Comfortable? Absolutely not. But when you're a peasant, comfort isn't a priority. Survival is. And the wealthy? They weren't much better. Sure, they had linen cloths, sometimes even perfumed with rose water, but what happens when you wash and reuse those cloths? You spread more disease than you clean. Luxury wiping medieval edition, soft on the bottom, deadly in the long run. And then there were the monks, holy men, devoted to prayer, squatting in cold stone garderobes. They often wiped with strips of old cloth, sometimes even pages from discarded manuscripts. That's right, sacred texts recycled as toilet paper. So if you ever wondered where that missing gospel went, check the monastery latrine. But while Europe wallowed in filth, other parts of the world had figured it out. In the Islamic world, water was the norm. A jug, a fountain, a wash basin, clean, efficient, and far less disease-ridden than Europe. In China, people were already using paper for hygiene centuries before Europe caught on. Imagine the medieval knight scoffing at such luxury while he scratches his rear with straw.
Still, wiping wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about shame. Privies were often public. Whole rows of garderobes, no walls, no doors. You sit, you wipe, you chat. Privacy? Forget it. Imagine making small talk with your neighbor while swatting away flies and praying your cloth doesn't rip. And of course, there were accidents. The waste pits overflowed, streams became open sewers, children played nearby, sometimes even fell in. If you think this sounds like the start of a plague, you'd be right. Disease spread like wildfire, and wiping habits only made it worse. But let's not pretend it was all horror. Medieval people laughed about it too. Taverns rang with jokes about who had the smelliest garderobe, who slipped on waste in the streets, who reused the same rag too many times. Crude? Yes. Human? Absolutely. And yet, for all their filth, they survived. Generation after generation, wiping with whatever nature, or desperation, provided. Straw, moss, snow, linen, water, even books. The human backside saw it all. So next time you sit on your porcelain throne, whisper a thank you to your toilet paper. It may not be glamorous, but at least it won't blow up in your face. Public latrines in the Middle Ages weren't private stalls. They were wooden benches with holes, lined up side by side like pews in a chapel. Sit down, and you might find a stranger's knees brushing yours. Privacy? That word didn't exist. And while you're trying to do your business, the man next to you might start a full conversation, politics, gossip, maybe even a sermon. Imagine trying to keep a straight face while 20 people do their business in unison. These benches often stood over pits that filled with waste faster than anyone could clear them. Methane gas built up beneath, one stray candle and boom! Records actually mention latrine explosions, death by toilet fire. Medieval life was dangerous enough, but imagine being remembered for blowing up on the loo. Nobles weren't spared either. Their garderobes might be tucked into castle walls, but they still emptied into moats or pits. One unlucky servant had to clean it up, usually at night when the smell carried less. The gong farmer, paid well, but often dead by 40, suffocated by fumes, infected by filth. It was a job no one envied. And peasants? They often had no pits at all. Fields, stables, alleys. The smell of waste clung to every town. In summer, buzzing flies feasted on filth before landing on food. Stomach infections spread like wildfire. Dysentery could wipe out whole villages faster than swords.
The irony? Medieval medicine sometimes claimed dirt was protection. Doctors during the Black Death warned against bathing. They thought open pores would let the plague in, so people stopped washing. Filth became a shield, at least in theory. In reality, it was an infection factory. Some tried to mask the horror with perfume. Nobles stuffed herbs in sleeves or pressed scented cloths to their noses. But let's be honest, no amount of lavender can beat a latrine pit under a summer sun. Meanwhile, other cultures were centuries ahead. The Islamic world built public bathhouses, sophisticated sewage systems, and emphasized water for cleanliness. In Baghdad or Cordoba, washing wasn't a luxury, it was law. 5 prayers a day meant washing 5 times a day. Compare that with Paris or London, where throwing a chamber pot out the window was considered normal. And then there was China. By the 14th century, they were making toilet paper, soft sheets reserved for emperors. Europe? Still scratching with hay and moss. By the 1500s, old manuscripts and pamphlets became wiping material. That means priceless texts, shredded, smeared, and flushed into history. Even Shakespeare's plays could have ended up as toilet paper. Imagine Hamlet's soliloquy read in the most undignified way possible. To be or not to be, followed by a very final wipe. By the 1800s, packaged rolls finally arrived. At first, people mocked them. Why waste money when corn cobs, straw, or newspapers were free? Only in the 20th century did the idea finally catch on, and with it, the end of a long, filthy chapter of human hygiene. But don't be fooled. Luxury didn't erase the stench overnight. Even kings, with all their silks and perfumes, smelled just as foul as their peasants when nature called. The throne may have been gilded, but the business was the same. So next time you roll out some toilet paper, remember, it's not just comfort, it's civilization printed on a roll.